Hello, good morning everyone watching off-site, and good morning everyone with us on-site at beautiful Dubai COP28 in this buildings pavilion for the third year in a row. We host, thanks to the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction from the United Nations Environment Programme for hosting the Buildings Pavilion. It's a great initiative, the house of the Buildings and Constructions community here at COP28. My name is Mariana Castaño Cano. I am the founder and CEO of 10 Billion Solutions, Climate and Sustainability Communications. And it's my absolute pleasure to be here hosting this session, very, very generously sponsored by Johnson Controls, who I sincerely thank also for the organization. This is a 1 hour and 15 minutes event, but it's been hours of hard work behind with the organizations taking place. I am also speaking with another hat. I am supporting communications for the Program for Energy Efficiency in Buildings, the PEEP, an initiative brought to you by AFD and GIZ. And we are hosting other events throughout the week, and I will maybe later invite you to join us. Thank you very much for being with us. It's a little bit of a challenge to go through the cues, but it seems like it's getting better and better. So it's boding well for the rest of the conference. Today, we are going to discuss how to unlock the implementation of climate action to decarbonize the built environment. And we are going to dive into the solutions and the enabling policies and finance, of course. If you have gone around this beautiful buildings pavilion, you may have seen some information, stats, facts on the walls. We are not there, but we are better equipped than last year. Last year, on the main wall of this pavilion, you could see the main finding from the status report from the Global ABC. It told us that we were consuming 37% of the energy demand for buildings and construction. This year, we are 34%. It's better, but it's not going fast enough. So it's a challenge. How do we fast decarbonize the built environment when the world needs more and more infrastructure? It's a challenge, and it's up to everybody in this room. Thank you for taking that challenge. Today, we are going to, very briefly, we are going to hear from the CEO of Johnson Controls, who's here with us. And we are then going to dive into a panel discussion with a number of organizations. I'm very briefly introducing them to you. We are going to hear a presentation first with some information to set the scene. We are going to hear from ECOM, from the Jordan Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Fund. We are going also to hear from the expert from JLL. And also, the presentation that I mentioned with Romain will be very interesting, because we need hard data also for sound and data-based decision-making here. And without further delay, it's my pleasure to give the floor to the head of Johnson Controls, George Oliver. George, please. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us, and thanks for the introduction this morning, Mariana. It has been an exhilarating few days at COP28, and I'm extremely encouraged by the progress being made as a global community to combat climate change. But as we all know, while the outlook for a lower carbon future is promising, there is still much more to be done. And just a few days ago, Johnson Controls held a COP28 kickoff event at the Museum of the Future on this very topic, which was decarbonizing the built environment. And the museum is more than just an architectural and engineering marvel. It's an example of how the built environment can lead the way in achieving global carbon targets. Our company, Johnson Controls, leads the way in creating smart and sustainable buildings like the Museum of the Future, and spaces and places that improve well-being, achieve climate goals, and ultimately save money. We use industry-leading digital solutions, building automation, and hyper-efficient heating and cooling system to save energy and ultimately reduce emissions. And we continue to advance safety with world-class fire detection and protection and smart security solutions. Now, I look back when I took over as CEO 6 years ago, I knew we would be a leader in sustainable building technologies, but could not have imagined how integral our company and industry would be to the broader climate change discussion. We all know, and we use the stat here frequently, buildings contribute nearly 40% of global emissions. But we can turn that colossal emissions challenge into the biggest, quickest win in the climate race. I believe it's the single biggest opportunity to be able to impact climate change. I firmly believe that much of the opportunity lies within the private sector and ultimately with the companies who have the power to lead the significant and sometimes difficult transitions to a lower carbon future. Business leaders recognize the ROI in the business case for sustainability. And at COP, we announced initial findings from a global landmark study with Forrester Consulting that shows that a focus on sustainability has penetrated nearly every corporate organization, and sustainability remains one of the top 3 business priorities, which is really good news. And while 2/3 of the survey respondents around the globe feel that they're on track to be able to meet their 2030 commitments, a full third realize they need to accelerate their efforts to meet their 2030 net zero goals. So partnership is the key. At Johnson Controls, we're partnering with customers around the world to ultimately design, digitize, and deploy solutions to achieve net zero. The journey starts when we design and roadmap solutions that achieve efficiency, sustainability, decarbonization, resiliency, and energy transition. Next, we digitize to make buildings smarter, connecting infrastructure, distributed generation, and the grid so we can access data that is critical, absolutely critical to making informed decisions to solve for cost and carbon. We then deploy our solutions through a one-source, turnkey delivery model that leverages best-in-class efficiency, electrification, and ultimately renewable solutions. Operations, service, and maintenance underpin our as-a-service offerings to maintain peak operating conditions, protect the customer's investment, and achieve the lowest life cycle cost. We also have an ecosystem of commercial partners making us uniquely qualified to ultimately lead the transition. But effective climate action also requires an urgent combination of shared business and government efforts. That's why we're all here at COP28, because it is critical to bring in all of the key stakeholders together. Governments are stepping up pressure to decarbonize buildings. More and more governments see the technology working, and they are beginning to legislate to get buildings to net zero faster. Deep decarbonization is a global imperative. As the IPCC scientists just reminded us, we have less than 7 years to cut emissions by more than 40% globally if we want to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And while that is a sobering fact, I'm more than optimistic that even that this is achievable, because we know today within the built environment, we have the technology, the solutions, and ultimately the financing that exists to make it happen. The use of AI and digital is critical. We've launched our digital platform, OpenBlue, which is a comprehensive ecosystem of connected digital solutions for buildings that can break down silos and connect all of the building systems regardless of the supplier, and ultimately make them fully operational, interoperable to build resiliency and efficiency. And it ensures buildings become a strategic asset, not just a balance sheet item, but a strategic asset providing greater value and returns using dynamic AI to fine-tune a building, multiplying the energy, emissions, costs, water, and waste savings, delivering on the promise of smart, autonomous buildings. Innovative financing, we believe, is a game changer. There can be a misconception that net zero is expensive. However, the flip side of buildings being responsible for so much of the climate challenge is that there is tremendous waste to cut. The savings from driving efficiency can pay for the upgrades, and when you also electrify the building with heat pumps and harness the data with a platform like OpenBlue, projects can then deliver an immediate return. And as we get into our discussion here today, I want to leave you with three key takeaways. First is sustainability is no longer a thing of charity. 70% of CEOs say that sustainability has proven its financial impact. So the game has changed from what we believe is nice to have to now a need to have. Second, there is a significant ROI for getting to net zero, but many can't afford the capital up front. The problem is that we can't afford not to act now, and that's why we are closing the financing gap and bringing as-a-service offerings, being able to upgrade, deploy digital, and change the fundamental outcomes that buildings can achieve by doing so, offering to that equation. Digitization and AI are the future. We believe that there's always been a tremendous amount of data in buildings that ultimately hasn't been put together into one common data set to actually change how buildings can operate and then how the occupants of buildings can actually work. We're just beginning of an era that is the acceleration that we now need can only be achieved with technologies like AI, delivering critical insights that uncover a new level of efficiencies while being able to deliver a mechanism to track and ultimately report the progress. The solutions exist today that enable us to be able to drive rapid progress. And if we work together, a better, more sustainable future is on the horizon. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Mariana to start the discussion. We have a tremendous, panel here today with a number of experts, and as we continue to all work together, I think we know what the path is now how do we be able to provide the leadership that brings it all together and makes it actionable. So on that, Mariana, let me turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, and may I ask a big applause for George. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, George, for your inspiring keynote, for letting us know about these three key principles that are guiding Johnson Controls' strategy. Thank you for that. So it is a matter of political will, of bridging that financial gap and being smarter, not doing less, but doing the same or more, but with less, right? And that will be hopefully, one of the outcomes of this COP, tripling renewable energy by 2030, but also doubling, which is really important, energy efficiency, because the greenest energy is the energy we don't waste. And without further delay, as George mentioned, I'm going to invite our amazing panel of speakers for our panel discussion. I'm going to invite to take the stage with me Farah Nath. Farah Nath is Director of ESG and Innovation for the Middle East and Africa region at ECOM. Farah, welcome. Also, Rasmi Hamzat. Rasmin is the Executive Director at Jordan Renewables Energy and Energy Efficiency Fund. Please, Rasmin. We also have Guy Grangier. I hope I'm not mispronouncing too badly the family names. Guy is the Global Head of Sustainability at JLL. Guy, please join us. We also have with us Tina Payet. Tina is the President-elect at RICS. Welcome, Tina. So, I don't know why they have put me so far away from you. I guess it is for us to watch, but I don't think we have a lot of slides, so I'm going to come closer to you. I don't want this to have this artificial separation between us, because this is supposed to be a conversation, a lively conversation. I hope you are energized. How do you feel today? How are you doing?
Just great after only 3 hours of sleep.
Oh my gosh, you beat me. I have 5.
Oh, right.
Wow.
Good on you. No, the flight came in late. So.
Oh, okay, too bad. I hope you can have a good rest later today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be with you today.
Thank you very much. Guy, how is COP treating you?
Yeah, so far so good. Yeah,
very good.
I'm full of energy. Ask me later in the week.
Good. QS are getting better, so we don't spend our energy outside of the venue, but rather inside. Yeah. And how are you doing? How is COP treating you?
Awesome, and good to see so many people attending the session today.
And those watching online as well, let's not forget. And thank you then for being connected. I know that it's 3 hours less in Europe, many more hours less in other places of the globe. So thank you everybody who's watching online. So in this panel discussion, we heard quite some inspiring insights from Johnson Controls, and now from your respective perspective, we are going to dive into the solutions. The title of this session is Enablers and Solutions to Unlock the Decarbonization of the Built Environment. So how do we, it's interesting because this morning I was walking around and I thought, okay, the energy and finance arena is between the infrastructure and urbanization arena and the people's arena, the youth and children, etc. So it's great because actually it represents how important the built environment is and how invisible it is. It's tons and tons of cement, steel, concrete, and glass. And we don't see it because it's part of our life, our homes, our schools, our hospitals. So how do we solve the challenge of decarbonizing the built environment, which is such a resource and energy intense sector? I'm going to start, Tina, maybe with you.
Great. Thanks, Mariana. And I'm really delighted to be here because this is a topic that's close to my heart and close to what RICS is really, really one of our fundamental goals, is to work on creating a more sustainable environment and a more sustainable profession. So one of the things that I think is a key enabler is being able to measure our carbon in order to improve. And what, you were talking about the stats that are on the wall, but we need stats that aren't just each year. We need to know exactly what's happening all the time. And that's something that I think George really, presented well for in introducing with Johnson Controls. But the other side of the flip coin is its whole life cycle carbon, the whole life carbon, meaning from every stage of a building, from inception all the way through to its end of life. And what RICS has worked on with a number of inputs from across the industry is developing our new standard on whole life carbon assessment. And whole life carbon assessment allows basically to understand, especially in addition to the operational carbon, the embodied carbon. And when we talk about only having 7 years left to meet our 1.5 degree goal, we need to take into account embodied carbon. Embodied carbon is the first thing that we're spending. A lot of it is upfront. So even before our buildings are handed over and occupied, embodied carbon is key. We could blow our whole budget of carbon just by building. And we continue to build a building the size of Paris every week globally.
Definitely, and these infrastructure are there to remain. So we are locking carbon in infrastructure that are there to remain for decades. So we really need to think before planning.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tina, for that. I'm now going to turn to Econ. From the regional perspectives, I really like your input to the discussion because we had, as I said, a lot of preparation. And you mentioned it's not a matter of building less, but building more because the demand, of course, is growing, but better. Tell us a little bit about this approach at Econ.
So linking to the point that you just mentioned, we're building a city the size of Paris every week. So it's 230 billion meters square of floor space will be built by 2050. Now, working for the world's largest infrastructure company, we have a role to play, and that's what we are doing. To respond to your question, there's 3 things which are extremely important. First is decarbonization at scale. So looking at cities and how do we decarbonize through district cooling, district heating system. Heating is required in many parts of this world. And then really understanding how do we do the marketability, scalability, and business opportunity from that. The second thing is innovation at scale. There's a lot of conversation about innovation. We are working on the biggest innovative projects in the region. And what we're seeing is that when you bring the technology with human together, it creates a story and people take ownership. So it's not just about innovation of technology, it's about human-centric innovation. We call it inclusive, integrated innovation, where business innovation, technical, and social comes together. And lastly, why are we doing all this? Because we want to build climate-smart cities. So for the last 10 years, the smart cities concept have evolved into climate-smart cities. That means climate resiliency, whole life carbon, that all comes together. this region, there's a lot of projects taking place which are working as a proof of concept, because the region has announced the 2050 net zero target. But in order to make these projects realize, we really need a proof of concept to understand how would the business case work to create a building truly sustainable, looking at the whole life carbon. So we are involved not only just building level, but infrastructure level, looking at carbon using the ScopeX process that we have. But then also, look at this event, and we are doing the carbon neutrality of this event. The team is sitting here, Frank, Robert, Yasser. So it's looking at city level, building level, and bringing it to event level is so important. I think that's where we need to link the stories together. It's not just focusing on one sector, but how do we link it together from a micro to a macro scale?
Thank you very much for that, Farah. We will look into we are very interested in looking after, I guess, that you will issue some report of the carbon footprint of this massive event. It's record breaking. It's double than the last year, which was already record breaking, but it demonstrates the interest in solving the climate crisis. Now, I turn to you, Guy. Well, from your perspective, JLL, so what are the three key messages on how can we unlock this accelerated decarbonization that we need?
Well, I suppose the perspective we have is that we're on the front line of market forces. And I think that what this industry needs to really solve for is the relationship between the owners and the users of the building, and get far more aligned on that, the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, not just in terms of the well-being of the people in there, but actually the way you use it, the way you develop it, so that it has a smaller footprint and hopefully in the future a negative impact rather than anything else. So, and I think that's something that's been dysfunctional in the past in this industry, is that it hasn't been a partnership between the owner and the occupier of the building, and we need to kind of solve for that. But I actually think the fact that these are real assets, like physical assets, is a massive advantage, right? I mean, you're right, Mariana, that we almost ignore it because it's in front of our face, but actually, when I speak to other industries, they see buildings as one of the easiest problems to fix, because we can measure everything. It is physical, and actually carbon should be easy. The challenge for the industry isn't what we need to do, it's how we're going to pay for it. Let's be really honest, because we know what we've got to do. Whole life carbon is the right approach. You need to look at the materials and the operational energy as well. And we just need to design that pathway. It doesn't need to happen overnight, but we need it to happen quickly. And I think that's not unreasonable for everyone to expect the industry to design that pathway and to deliver it. And I think the values ultimately, the finance will pay back as to whether you deliver it or whether you don't. If you don't deliver it, I totally agree with what George says. It's a need to have. If you don't deliver it, the value of your buildings will decrease at an incredibly fast rate. If you do deliver it, there is a huge opportunity for value creation. I think we're totally underestimating the opportunity. We're just looking at the risk at the moment.
Definitely. There is the moral case, the business case, right? It's everything is pushing us toward that direction. And I am now going to turn to you, Rasmi, because it's nice, all the talks, all the declarations, the announcements made, and hopefully more to come this week. But then it lands onto the table of those who need to fund the renewables and the energy transition. So in your case, in Lebanon. From the fund perspective, in Jordan, excuse me. From the Jordan renewable energy and energy efficiency perspective, do you feel some vertigo of what is going on, and how do you see this transformation? What should be the quick fix? Because I guess that you will need to do very fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mariana. And Absolutely, we need to appreciate the declaration 2 days ago of doubling the energy efficiency. Since we started, an intensive COPs 2015, we've been focusing just on renewable energy. I'm glad that this COP, we are saying clearly and in the final statement that we need as well, not to just triple renewable energy, we need to double our energy efficiency. This is good. Second, I'm so glad about the global ABC activities latest. Actually, everybody became on board now. And the last assembly been great, and we are looking forward for our conference in Paris next year. This is amazing as well. Step forward. Hopefully, a lot of action will be created and determined at this conference. Third, I would like here to focus as a governmental institution. We are Jordan Renewable Energy Fund and Energy Efficiency Fund as well, not just renewable energy. Here we need two things to ensure that it's set it up. First of all, on policy level, we need to ensure that the policymakers are with us on the same board. So we need to design the right policies for the existing building and for the new buildings as well. So codes here is very important, and we need to ensure that we are updating regarding this issue. And here we will link it also with the technology. You mentioned and about the innovation. I'm saying here knowledge transferring between different countries and partners is very important, and it will help. Second, we need to design the right financial mechanisms. And here we need the state interfering. Without state interfering, will not get success. Banks alone or financial institutions alone, they will not push forward the whole issue. So we need to focus that. The government will interfere with a very special and comprehensive incentives, in addition to some financial programs as well, in order to ensure that we are pushing forward the right actions for the existing building again and for the new building. So with this, I think we can guarantee that everybody will be on board, and we will start changing the culture. Building is culture. It's more than just building a home. It's also changing with the culture of building. It's costing, yes. However, we need to be ensured that everybody on board, and we need to ensure that the policy framework is helping and supporting.
Yeah, buildings is a world view somehow. We need to change our view on the world to be able to change the way we build the world. And Guy, you were saying that this is a very unstructured ecosystem. But what I personally have seen in the last 3 years since the Buildings Pavilion first started in Glasgow, it's an incredible mobilization of the stakeholders, even though they are very diverse, not just in the supply chain, but regionally. I mean, the reality here and in I was in Singapore a few weeks ago, and I was just amazed by the world view they have when they build their built environment. It's incredible. So we need to be aware of the different realities. One doesn't fit all. It's very good that France is convening next year the Global Forum, because we all need to kind of learn from each other so that we can move fast enough to the deadlines, which are next week. 2030, when we talked about buildings, is next week. But as you said, Tina, we need a dashboard. Right? We need to know what we're talking about. We need to monitor the movement as it happens. And now I am going to invite to join us our presenter, because we are going to have a very interesting, very rich presentation this morning with Romain Poivet. Romain is with us from the World Benchmarking Alliance, and he's going to introduce us to the element of accountability. How does it look like, especially when it's pouring announcements and commitments? Please, yes, you can present from there.
Should we sit down so that they can see the screen?
You can see.
Okay. Yeah. Check. Can you hear me? Yeah. Does it work? It works? Okay. So hi everyone. So yes, I'm Romain Poivet. I'm the climate engagement lead for the World Benchmarking Alliance, which is a non-profit organization that basically assess the most influential companies in the world on their performance regarding SDGs. So we have 7 transformation systems, and I will mainly talk today about the decarbonization and energy benchmark, plus some social aspect, as we also assess in our climate and energy benchmark, the just transition and social aspect of the transition. Maybe just to start the presentation, maybe a few words about our theory of change regarding the accountability for companies. We consider that it all starts with the global agendas, and such as the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, or the Global Biodiversity Framework. And it's an overall ecosystem, I would say, that leads to corporate accountability. So it starts with the global agenda, the stakeholders' engagement, the standards and framework, the research and analysis, the people, stakeholders and regulation action, and the company's transformation. Unfortunately, there is too many gaps within this cycle, let's say, circle, which in a nutshell leads to no transformation, I would say deep transformation of companies, or at least not at the right level of speed. If you just take a look from the starting point on global agenda, the global agenda do not articulate the responsibility of business, and it's, I won't say something that you don't know, but for instance, the Paris Agreement and more especially the UNFCCC has no legitimacy to cover the company's aspect and the transformation of the private sector in general. So there is a first gap here. Okay. Then every stakeholders can expect different things from companies. Could be profits, simply work, environmental contribution, climate contribution, and so on. So there is also a lack or a gap where regarding the expectation from stakeholders. Then, even if we start to have some, let's say, commonly accepted standards regarding climate disclosure standards, there is still a huge gap in the in universal accepted standard, especially, for instance, on building. I was surprised, like 4 years ago, when we started to develop the ACT methodologies on the building sector, to learn that a square meters doesn't mean the same from one country to another. So how you can start to monitor and track performance if you don't have the same, let's say, unit to compare things. So then we know that there is a lot of limited open access to research and data and analysis to really track the contribution and the progress of companies regarding the climate agenda. And we know that most of the action taken by the regulators and the civil society are not consequential to company, meaning that there is not enough, I would say, reward for those who contribute really to global agendas, neither, I would say, penalty for those who don't contribute at all. That just to, let's say, set the global picture. Now, let's start to talk about the building sector. As you know, 37% of the global emissions, of CO2 emissions, come from the building sector entire value chain, with more than 1/4 coming from direct and indirect emission of the use phase of those buildings. At the COP27, we saw a range of initiatives and some already existing initiatives were confirmed to drive deep collaboration and trigger systemic transformation for the building sector, where many actors actually do not act, I would say, in a collaborative way in order to really support the transformation, so leading to this kind of feeling of nobody's fault to achieve really the decarbonization of the building sector. Nevertheless, we know that the building sector has a big role to play in the decarbonization and actually also in the resilience aspect against the climate change effect. But that's another topic. I won't talk about the adaptation part today. So with the 2030 building breakthrough, it was said that all the new projects completed for 2030 will be net zero carbon in operation with 40% of reduction of embodied emissions. So where are we? So based on the benchmark, the latest building benchmark that we published earlier this year, I can show you some key insights. First insight is that if you look at the compliance of the 50 keystone companies that we assess on the building sector, and if we look at this sample on their performance regarding the Section 3 transition plan of the high-level expert group recognition framework, the building has the lowest score. So I'm happy to hear you saying that there is a lot of opportunities for decarbonization and so on, but actually it doesn't really happen on the ground, and especially if you look at the transition plan of companies. As you can see, only 34 companies over the 50 has aligned with 2 criteria from the H-Leg criteria, and 26 companies are compliant with less than 6 of those criteria. And no company at all have reached more than 50% of those criteria. So it's kind of a concern, I would say. To do those assessments, we used the ACT initiative methodologies, which is basically one of the most complete methodology according to the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. So we used the 3 methodology from the ACT initiative, the one on property developer, construction and real estate management, to do this assessment. As I said, we assessed the decarbonization part with the ACT methodologies and the social and just transition part with the just transition methodology from the World Benchmarking Alliance. You can here see the 10 best performer on the building sector. Unfortunately, we can't say that any of them has a, let's say, credible transition plan. So it's kind of a real concern. The first key insight is that basically companies are locking in emission for decades by not delivering efficiency, low carbon buildings. There is an absence of commitment regarding the renovation of the existing building. Only 11 companies have, let's say, set and implement commitment regarding the renovation of their portfolio. But we all know that by 2030, the IEA Net ZE scenario requires that all new and renovated buildings to be net zero ready. But that's not the case at the moment. So there is a strong need for more, I would say, regulation and ambitious regulation to improve also standards and codes for the sectors, starting by sharing the same definition of a square meter. The key insight number 2 is that only a small portion of companies have planning low carbon transition. 54% of them haven't yet developed any transition plan, and 44% of them have even no GHG reduction target. So there is no, even the basics, I would say. And only 22% of them have set net zero target for their scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. So happy to hear you talking a lot about embodied emission, but as you can see, the reality is a bit different than what we have in mind. and the sector doesn't have any, let's say, relevant structural approach to decarbonize the entire value chain. On the key insight number 3, companies should lead to, with example, and incentivize all stakeholders to really decarbonize the entire value chain. But 46% have no client engagement strategy at all, which is also a lot of concern. I'm conscious of the time, so I will skip to the final aspect on the social aspect. Over 1 million of workers are at risk on the building sectors, knowing that most of those companies are not planning for just transition at all. All companies score 0 on the just transition, which is also a huge concern. So just to conclude, what can we expect next? Maybe we need to acknowledge that the transition is a huge opportunity for the building sector, as the previous speaker said, but we need for more standards and more ambitious standards. There is a strong needs also for codes and incentives for renovating the existing buildings and for retrofitting the existing buildings, and also to develop more ambitious building. There is also a need for accountability tool for all the building sector segment, I would say, from construction, property developer, and real estate managers. And I think that actually the building breakthrough is maybe the right place to track the progress of those companies. So I will stop here, and thanks a lot.
Merci Romain for this reality check. Merci, and I'm inviting the panelists to rejoin us. Merci beaucoup. Wow, so zero companies aligned with the Just Transition work program, which is being discussed very intensively behind the walls of the Blue Zone negotiation room. So I think that it's an important update that will need to be undergone by the sector very soon, right? So we heard on the first part of our panel about the pointers that you underscore. These are the way forward. Let's see. So we have kind of a North Star now. Now, how do we get there? What are the enablers? Incentives, also, as you said, barriers that we need to break as well. Sometimes it's the carrot and it's the button. So now let's gonna deep dive into the enabling policies and the nitty-gritty of the how. How do we get there, Tina?
Yeah, Romain, that was incredible. That overview just really, I think, puts really clear. And we also at RICS have what we are calling an annual sustainability report. It is it's not as factual, it's more the impression of our sector. And what that's showing is that we are way behind. We are not there for meeting our 2050 goals. And notably, what the many of the players, 56% of the respondents to our survey say that they are not able to decarbonize because they are worried about capital costs, and they're worried about no return on investment. So it's 56% about high additional cost as a principal barrier, and 38% of lack of clarity on your return on investment. Those are key numbers. So finance, which I do believe exactly what you were saying earlier, is that finance has to come from the private sector. These buildings belong to the private sector. They need to be investing. But right now there's not enough clear return on that investment. So where I think we're heading in policy initially, I'd like to talk about the EU policy, which is really, I think, probably setting the path for other policies, other regions that will hopefully follow. And one of the things the EU is going to do very well is the green taxonomy. In some ways, it's almost a name and shame, because corporates of a certain size have to report whether or not they're marketing, because part of what, I'll take a step back, part of what the EU Green Taxonomy is for is to avoid corporates or asset managers or any firm that wants to market that they're selling a green product will avoid them being able to greenwash, because they will have to, in order to market, they will have to respond to these criteria within the EU taxonomy. But it goes further than that. Major corporations have to report the actual portion of their portfolio of real estate that is aligned with the taxonomy, which means that whether you want to market it as green or not, which everyone does, but okay, they could hold off, but they can't actually avoid reporting. And I think that that name and shame is going to lead a number of corporates to require themselves, for their own benefit, to have a clear transition plan. And that's where I think those are the tools to enable. Clear transition plans are absolutely key for these companies to start. And for our sector, a transition plan means CapEx. It means planning the CapEx. It means building the plans, the business plans around the CapEx. And we're not talking about actually being able to, in the past, you add CapEx on and you add it directly to your value. This is no longer the case. If you don't take care of this CapEx, you will have obsolescence from both a technical, from a socially acceptable marketing standpoint, but also from an obsolescence from a legal compliance standpoint. So this CapEx is going to have to go in order to maintain values. Otherwise, it's a brown discount.
Yeah, so we may find with stranded assets now, we speak a lot about the fossil fuel these days. Everybody's expecting that out of this COP, we had a strong declaration based on the global stocktake that we must rapidly phase out fossil fuels. And after that, buildings and construction is the next frontier. So this morning, the NGOs were demonstrating at the entrance of the Blue Zone. Maybe in the coming years, they will be demonstrating at the entrance of the buildings pavilion and the finance pavilion, because Guy, you mentioned before, there is still a lack of alignment between owners, users, financiers from JLL perspective. How do you see, what are the low-hanging fruit? What could be done the fastest, the most effective way?
Well, I think I think there are already lots of proof points out there which actually prove the return on investment. So I know your survey said like 76% said it costs too much and they don't see a return. But I honestly think that's just an excuse because there are proof points everywhere. I mean, the office sector is a classic example where we've got a 30% decline in demand, but in nearly every major developed city in the world, we've had a record new rent set this year, right? And they're nearly all for sustainable grade A buildings. So that's a clear proof point that if you produce the right product, you'll get a return on investment. So I think the difficulty is getting this message across that the cost of inaction is a massive degradation in value. And we're in a traditional conservative industry that sort of want to see that happen before they believe it. And I think that our industry needs to stop looking in the rear mirror and looking forward. And what will trigger it? I think when the transactional markets properly return, in terms of assets being sold in the market, we will see that only assets with a credible pathway are liquid. I think everything else is illiquid at the moment. And so I think, Romain, your point about credible pathways is really relevant. It's something we're working on at JLL. We don't have that pathway in place, but I'm hoping if we see each other in a year's time, we might have it in place. And the difficulty with this subject is that to enable this to happen, you need to change the way you work. And you need to change the way you do a business case. You need to change the way you take a business case to your investment committee. And most organizations think that this will just evolve and happen naturally, but this is an intervention. And you have to, therefore, be very intentional about it. So it requires leadership. And The companies that are leading in this space are the private entrepreneurial companies, and they're creating proof points in every single market around the world that this actually makes money. And when it comes to kind of regulation, I'd just like to, and policy, of course, Europe, through EU taxonomy and reporting and disclosure, have forced a change. Right? They have definitely forced a change. I don't think Europe would be doing as much as it is just because we're culturally more sensitive to this. I think that regulation has helped. But I would point to the regulation and policy that's had the biggest impact this year. It's in the US, right? And we should actually credit the Congress with that, right? They have turned this into an incentive, a money-making opportunity to create renewable energy solutions, and the reaction is enormous. And I think Europe and other nations need to have a look at that and see, like, that could accelerate the US far quicker than other regions. So it's not all about reporting and disclosure. You need also some incentives in the system to speed it up, because this will happen, but we just need it to happen more quickly. So I'd just highlight that the Inflation Reduction Act has been a hugely positive step.
Definitely. And in a very short time, we are already seeing the fast deployment of self-consumption of renewable energy, for example. It's going very, very, very fast. Farah, you said at the beginning that we need a change in the view. We need to build more, not less, but definitely much better. In this region, which is one of the fastest growing in terms of infrastructure building, what are the key enablers that are maybe already accelerating the transition of the sector?
So the policies are still on the way. But what we are seeing is from different developers and private sectors, the need to change. So linking back to Guy's point, people understand that a change needs to start place very quickly. So it's the mindset shift. So I'll give you an example. We are doing cost and carbon modeling. So when we talk to developers and clients, sometimes carbon is important, but people don't really understand it. We don't even know how much carbon in a cup of coffee is, but everything has carbon, right? But when we started talking about cost and carbon, and the clients could see that each decision they're making in a 3D model, different decision material choices they're making, it's defining the carbon factor and the cost. That shifts the mindset. And that has been really successful. So I'm not allowed to say the name of the project, but we have worked on projects where it started with just one building and it moved to several buildings and master planning level work, where we're looking at cost and carbon modeling of buildings as well as infrastructure. And that's really positive, because if you can't measure it, monitor it, how can you enable change? That links with the investment modeling and the business case modeling of these decisions. So these are the shifts started taking place, but linking back to Guy's point, of course, the speed of transition needs to be much faster. The second example that I can talk about, which is happening amazingly, is food production. Food production takes a lot of energy, water, especially in this part of the world. Food is flown, and that has a carbon footprint. So when the government decided they want to grow their own food, aquaponics, and that's the easiest example, it started a revolution. So aquaponics is a technology, but master planning level projects started adopting aquaponics. Schools started having gardens, aquaponic gardens, to teach children about agriculture. The shift took place when the ecosystem changed. So from a technology, it became social entrepreneurship. Government started giving investments for entrepreneurs to come and build this market. So there's a technical innovation that shifted into a social change because people started learning about it and then created an ecosystem of business. In 5 years' time, it has grown so much that this year government announced a $10 billion investment for next 5 years and 20,000 job creation. So anybody, if you have flown in Emirates, all the vegetables that you see are grown in an aquaponic farm in Dubai. So most of the shops, if you go to, you see that aquaponic gardens. 10 years ago, this wasn't there. So what we are seeing is that in this part of the world, food, energy, water, and access, the interrelationship is being addressed, not in a singular way, but more in a connected way. It started happening project by project basis. What we would like to see is it goes in a master planning and city planning level, That's why the district cooling solutions, district energy solution, district food production solutions are so important, because in this part of the world, the connection of water production, water desalination, the energy production and the food production is interlinked. And that really has an effect of how we build our cities, create livable cities, because as you have all experienced, we're in the middle of a winter and it's really hot. But 10 years ago, my colleague was just talking about it, it wasn't this hot at all. So the microclimatic effect is changing. Therefore, the way we address, and it brings back to your point, the mindset shift, the business model shift, we can't do business as usual. We need to rethink the way we put our business cases together for projects, to investors, and how do we rethink our projects that we are putting forward. Clients sometimes comes with great ideas, but sometimes we have to take the ownership and responsibility to have those meaningful conversations. I think that shift we started seeing happening both in UAE and other part of the GCC, which is extremely positive.
Yeah, it's truly inspiring. And by the way, we can learn how much carbon it is on a coffee cup here at Expo Dubai in the Sustainability Pavilion. You can see if you have time after your duties in the blue zone, you can have a walk in the green zone, and it's really educational going to the Sustainability Pavilion.
Can I say something?
Sure, please.
So Sustainability Pavilion is a project I delivered with my team, and that was a starting
congratulations.
point.
It's beautiful.
But that was a starting point to have those mindset shifts. So it's so great that you talked about this, because when the project was built, that was the idea of the project. How do we change the conversation in small ways? So thank you.
Thank you very much, because I got quite some inspiration in Expo when I visited, and fortunately for everybody now here, this is still there and can be visited, and we can all learn from. I'm now going to bring it back to the very concrete and specific of making this transition, the money, exactly. So from the Jordan renewable energy and energy efficiency perspective, so you spoke a bit earlier about the need for more regulation. Can you please explain a little bit more what kind of policy frame and incentives, economic incentives, we need to see from the public sector, from the government?
Just to remind you that our expectation being by 2030 that to decrease our emission by 43%. Actually the UN report this year saying we are not moving, we are the same, and we are very close to 2030. This is why doubling the energy efficiency it might be a good opportunity. And again, when we talking about decarbonization, the building, and we are saying here together. That's mean the whole world. I'm not talking about like a country or a city like Dubai or like Berlin. We are talking about the whole world. We are talking about all sectors at the same time, including residents, including industrial sector, including tourism sector. 70% of the world industries facilities are in the third world countries. And I think we need to ensure if really they are thinking about responsibility and ownership about decarbonize their building. This is very important. So we are talking about one globe. It's not a city. It's not a country alone. This is why our mission at the Global ABC is important, to ensure that everybody understands exactly that we need to move together, not city alone, not a country alone, not a rich country alone. This is important. As part of this, actually, ensuring that the decision makers and policy makers are on board is important. What type of policies that you need to make, ensure it should be in parallel with the financial mechanisms. And again, state intervention is very important. All the governments, they should assign money to push forward this sector. And when they do that, they are not just paying money for a company to do that or incentive here or there. They are creating a new market. The opportunity is to create a huge market with energy efficiency and creating a green job opportunities. This is exactly what we are looking forward. It's more than energy. efficiency even. It's market. And that's including, of course, the contractor, the supplier, the whole supply chain that we need to work on it. It's not just only one piece of the puzzle. This is important. In Jordan, actually, there is we developed a financial mechanism and we developed code buildings, updated, up to date. Actually, we communicate with the best practices over all the world, and they have authority to follow up and to check. Again, the cost of implementing the buildings to be net zero building is still high. The return back on investment is for a loan. And this is why an efficient financial mechanism and incentives to support these sectors and these buildings is very important.
Yeah, and there are the non-monetary incentives as well that we need to take into account. There are some reports from the PIB that speak on that, the non-monetary incentives that
And by the way, Brianna, banks alone not doing the right job. The banks still continue as banks.
Yeah, sure. It's very conservative thinking. So, we need the banks on board as well. Now I would like to turn to the audience, and I would like to invite for questions, comments, reaction, ideas. I see already 2 hands, so I think I have just this mic. So please introduce yourself when you ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, Yasser, ACOM. Thanks for the insightful presentation. I've got a question, I think maybe for Guy or for Tina. We talked a lot about financing, obviously finance is a big part of the agenda at this COP. To what extent will the consumer have to foot the bill, the general public? There's not much mention of that, and that's political, and there's a trade-off there in terms of decisions that increase taxes for consumers, energy prices are rising. So to what extent will the financing pressure and challenges be foot by consumers, and what is the alternative potentially?
Excuse me, what is your name?
Yasser Ali from
Yasser.
ACOM.
Okay, thank you, Kezar, for this question.
I think it depends what we're talking about, because actually, if we are going to double energy efficiency, the consumer will benefit from that, right? So, and I think we're underestimating particularly what's happened in Europe with the energy crisis. You know, if buildings were more efficient, we wouldn't have faced half the problems we've faced, and government wouldn't have had to subsidize the customer quite a lot. The other aspect is, what are customers prepared to pay for? And the evidence so far is pretty little, actually. All the customers are joining this conversation, but very few of them are prepared to pay for the transition. I'd say Gen Y, Gen Z is in a slightly different place from the rest of the generations, and that evidence is playing out. And from speaking to most of the industries here, 10% of the pull is coming from customers, actually. So I think it's incumbent upon the industries and the private businesses to find a way of doing this where actually all of the cost doesn't flow through to the customer. And that is about changing your business model, changing your values. It's interesting, I was at dinner last night opposite an executive at Mars, the private family food company, and they've made a public statement that 1% of their revenue, in other words, they're going to dilute their percentage margin by 1% to pay for the transition. It's actually a really big number, but if you just put it in that perspective, that's a private company doing that. The problem with the financial system at the moment is that not many shareholders or financiers are actually building in shareholder value for companies doing that. Private companies can do it. So I think that the financial system needs to kind of respond to this quite a lot as well. And I'm really interested to see what comes out of Finance Day, because our whole capital market system relies on a lot of lending. And the lending community have the opportunity to tip this and create real incentives. But at the moment, the gap between lending on a green finance package deal and a normal finance package deal is not materially different. I think that will change between now and the end of the decade, and the sooner the better, because we need to find money to finance the transition. We don't need find money to invest in green products, right? There aren't enough green products here. We need the money to be pumped into the transition. So, long answer to the fact is, I don't think the customer will end up paying. I think business models need to adapt to bring the customer with us. Otherwise, your business model isn't going to work, right? If your customers go away. So, we'll see. As it comes to buildings, commercial tenants, I think, are paying for this now. I think they are. They just want quality, and that quality includes a low carbon building. And the rest is deteriorating so quickly in value.
Yes, I fully agree what Guy has just said. And I think what we need to think about in our sector in particular is that the client is the end user. So if we're talking about the end user, I think they will benefit enormously from better buildings, more efficient buildings. But I do think that the corporates who are the tenants of some of these buildings are paying a premium for it's a market which is becoming two-speed. There is the market for buildings that have green credentials, that are decarbonized, that are virtuous, and they are commanding premium rents. And then there's the rest of the market.
But they're only commanding premium rents because there's an undersupply. I mean, most commercial tenants say to me, why should I have to pay more for a low-carbon building? Surely that's that's a minimum expectation, right? But they are paying more at the moment because there's not enough supply. And then investors say, show me the return on investment. Well, you got it right there, right? There's a supply-demand imbalance of low-carbon buildings, full stop, everywhere in the world, without exception.
Yeah, but if we were to actually bridge that gap through some very incentivized decarbonizing and retrofit of our buildings, we could actually break down that barrier. And we could have a supply that was meeting demand, but we're not there yet. We're way, way behind, way behind. So I think that imbalance. So if you really want to know who's paying, I do think that corporates that are renting these very, very green buildings today are paying.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Jessie, for that. We have another question. Yeah, Yves Laurent.
Non, ça marche pas. Si ça marche, ok. Hello, I'm Yves Laurent from the French Ministry of Environment globally, and so thank you for all your quotes and your action supporting the global forum we're organizing in March 2024. And I just wanted to just remind you that the question is, we are talking here, the people in the room are globally convinced. We need to talk to the people around. One of the ways to talk to the people around is to make this global forum a success. The other way is to be numerous, lots of you, talking about the launch of the buildings breakthrough that will happen on the 6th of December in Al-Waha Theatre. We have had a huge buy-in by the COP presidency for our launch, so they gave us a room of, I think it's 1,000 persons room. So please come with friends. No, it's important because if we make this launch a success here, people hear about and start talking about buildings, and it's really a win-win. So my message here is help you to help us. Help us to help you, and the other way around. I don't know exactly. So anyway.
What time is that, Yves Laurent?
It's 12:30 on the 6th of March in Al-Waha Theatre.
At the entrance, right?
Yes, it's on the left at the entrance.
After the metro and after registration.
And it's a very beautiful room.
We'll count.
Yes, and we'll see. Okay, so you can register or not. Come as many as you. And as for the questions that have been asked, I think, well, to be really quick on that. There's a huge difference in terms of customers between the south and the north, between new buildings and renovation, because of course there's a cost to renovation that doesn't exist. Well, that exists really less in the new buildings, especially in the south, where there are low-cost solutions that need to be applied, very simple low-cost and no-regret solutions, because the overcost is very, especially for housing, which is more or less 60 to 80% of the new buildings, is really small. So in terms of answer to the cost for the customer, it would be a win-win, really. But all this will be discussed. We have 20 sessions, workshops for engagement at the Paris Forum. We have 20 thematics, and this will be covered. So enrich our reflection, help us to make this forum a real success.
In March, 7, 8 March?
March, 7 and 8 of March, yes.
Okay. Coming numbers too. We will welcome you in Paris. Please introduce yourself. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Omar Tab. I'm with Brainbox AI. Question maybe for Farah and Guy. Your two companies are kind of respectively large players in the engineering and operations of buildings. And as we saw earlier, operations of buildings are about 27% of global emissions annually. What do you think are the best ways we can, before the question, we often see kind of improvements in design, improvements in new equipment, in new buildings, and then when the buildings get transferred over into the operational mode, somehow there's a drift, right, of the performance of the building from its design state or commission state. And what looked at the outset to be a very efficient building is no longer as efficient as we thought it was going to be over its life cycle. Long intro for me to ask, what is the best way, in your opinion, or ways that the linkage between your two worlds can occur to either reduce or eliminate that problem?
You want to go first?
Sure, I can go first. Okay. You want to? Or?
Yeah, I can. So I'll give an example. Museum of the Future, Expo 2020 Sustainability Pavilion. These are the two big projects. And then there's a Mazda Eco Villa in Abu Dhabi, which is the epitome of how residential sustainability would work. These three projects, when they were built, before the building was built, it was designing, the FM team was tendered, and then they were coming on board to see and work with the design team to ensure that it's a smooth transition. Now, why did the client did that? Because when the design team was designing these projects, Mazda Eco Villa was designed 10 years ago, Museum of the Future was designed 8 years ago, and Expo was 5 years ago. People knew that operation and design, there's a discrepancy. So hence, what we are seeing in this part of the world, these are the big projects I'm talking about, but even for the other projects, the operations is not a problem, because there's a ESCO model has been launched in this part of the world 5 years ago, and Dubai Supreme Council of Energy is really making sure that operation is getting optimized. The biggest challenge we have in this part of the world is whole life carbon, is the embodied carbon, the design, and the operational carbon. We are very good in even calculating operational carbon. That's even not a problem. But the embodied carbon conversation, the awareness, the insight, that's where our challenge is in this part of the world. If you look at the data globally and here as well, which is published in the UAE government's page, you will see the operational efficiency is going higher. The challenge is the design efficiency in terms of carbon conversation. So we have a little bit of a different challenge here.
Yeah, that's great, because this is exactly where, with RICS, we're coming out with our whole life carbon assessment standard. Not only does it help teams to break down the silos when they're designing between those, the decision maker, being able to make a decision on something that's been looked at from both a cost and a carbon standpoint, but through its entire life cycle. So it means weighing in on design decisions early on. Which materials are most effective? How much of the building can we reuse? How many reused materials can be integrated, which would be bringing down that carbon factor? So that's important. But I also think what Faranaz was saying about having everyone on board early and being able to rally around a roadmap. The building isn't built by one entity, handed over to another, operated by a third. This is an entire team that has been working with one common tool and one common vision, which is the whole life carbon vision of the building. And then it's used to measure every year. You can check. How are you doing? Every time you have to renovate something, you strip a floor out to bring in a new tenant, you can then check, is this fitting what we said we were going to do? And you have that dashboard. So I think this is where the sort of whole life carbon assessment can really be helpful for bringing people together.
Okay, we have Guy and Rafi.
Yeah, I'm glad that Farah mentioned the ESCO's model here in the Emirates. Like a decade before it started. In Jordan, we started this last year. Actually, we built the ESCO's model, and now we are developing all the legal framework, EPC contracting, and everything. We have a problem regarding the financing the ESCOs, because ESCOs they are not rich company. They are technical company. So that we are trying to interfere as a fund, as a state, to build the financial mechanism to help, to facilitate, to guarantee, as well as to subsidize with the interest rate with the banks, and to help technically to provide the banks with the technical side, so that the bank, they can't understand the energy audit study. We are facilitating this, and we sign an agreement with the banks that we will send you a letter that this is feasible. So that it will be guaranteed, and they will start their procedure for lending. This is very important. This is what we did in Jordan, and until now, more than 80 industrial facilities joined the program since that time, and we are guaranteeing and subsidizing the loans with almost 5% interest rate, and for long term. And this is a kind of state intervention, which is very, very important.
Innovative finance, as George was saying at the beginning. Guy.
Yeah, I just want to come back to your point. I think you raised a really interesting point around, actually there are very few user manuals of buildings. So when the user gets in the building, the way they use it is often really inefficient. And this is, to come back to something I said at the beginning, this alignment between the owner and the occupier and the end user needs to be much better. So how can you monitor the way the building's being used and give really, really useful advice to the users about habits they can change to improve the energy efficiency of the building, right? I mean, it's interesting. In our workplaces, we've now analysed everything that we do, and actually the cooking facilities and the coffee facilities are the biggest energy user in the building, not the terminals where we plug in, not the lights, not the, it's complete misinformation that most people have about the things that are really driving the energy. So, how can we be much better about that? Everybody likes their coffee, but how can we have a really efficient way of providing coffee for our people, right? These things are really important because there's a lot of misinformation out there and misguidance about what is using up the most energy. And often just people haven't been told actually how they can behave in a building which will really reduce or improve the performance of that building. There's going to be far more scrutiny about energy use intensity in buildings. And I think this is where the user becomes a really important stakeholder, which at the moment, they're getting no information about that.
There are a lot of beliefs which are not funded on solid information. So we need a huge effort of education, of course, in the sector, but with the user, the end user, of course, the operators. But it is important that we do an effort of communication. Otherwise, there will no social buy-in of the massive effort that we all need to undertake. We have time maybe for a very brief question, Robert, and then we'll wrap up.
Thanks, Mariana. So Robert Spencer from ACOM. It's just a brief follow-on question, possibly, picking up on your last point, Guy, in fact. it's clear that although there's a lot of focus on Scope 3 emissions and supply chain sustainability, actually I'm seeing that Scope 2 is coming under a lot more scrutiny just now, particularly from the investment community. And I'm wondering whether increased and enhanced disclosures around Scope 2 emissions, we're seeing what's happening in California and the new EU reporting guidelines, is that going to be a significant driver for building energy efficiency and actually shifting the whole energy consumption patterns of buildings with lots more scrutiny around whether there are good renewable energy certificates in place, whether there are power purchase agreements and such. So I just wondered if this is playing into the equation.
Yeah, I think it's going to massively help. I think there needs to be a lot more credibility about renewable energy certificates, PPAs. I think there's been a lot of money thrown at that at the moment, and just how real is it in terms of reducing the footprint. I think the more scrutiny, the better in that space. So I I'm really hope the SEC get behind it as well, because Scope 1 and 2 should be basic entry-level disclosure that everybody should have, and it should be full transparency on it, because I think RECs are being used very, very candidly around the world at the moment.
Just we have 30 seconds before. Okay, let's wrap up, because we had a delay today in the timing of our event. We don't want to prevent you from moving on with the rest of your day. But we are relatively at the beginning of the COP. Big things are going to happen. The buildings breakthrough, Finance Day, energy. I want now to ask you for a very quick round of intervention to tell us what are your hopes for this COP and what should happen next year, so that at COP29 we are not telling ourselves, okay, we keep making the same mistake, we are not there, the numbers on the wall are not the ones we want to see. Romain will be able to present a better reality check. So your expectation for COP28 and what we should see in 2024. Tina.
It's always tough to go first on these. I think what would be a key positive outcome for the built environment is that the recognition that decarbonization and pathways to decarbonization for the built environment are necessary, that the financing for that is going to have to come through the support of the public and private in partnership. And that underpinning that, I believe that both regulation and incentives, such as Guy was mentioning, very successful incentives coming through things like the IRA in the US. So I think that's my wish, is that policy will be a driver to support both public and private investment in decarbonizing.
Thank you, Tina, for that. Rasmi, from your perspective.
I hope that scope really will include this statement on the final decision of doubling energy efficiency and tripling renewable energy. It's important. Second, I hope that the G20 countries, they will committed to financing this, to support all the funds, UN funds and UN initiative like Global EBC programs on this. This is very important. We need commitment. Since 2015 until now, we are talking about 100 billion, 200 billion, and nothing happened until now. We need more commitment on this. Without commitments of the governments, we will not move a step forward. As it's very clear with the UN report, IPCC this year, that we are not moving and we are not in the right path. Each year we have the same statements, but the achievements really not good. Hopefully this year it will be different.
Thank you, Rasmi. Guy.
Well, I hope we get all of that, but with more elections in the Western democratized world in the next 12 months than anywhere else, I'm not sure we're going to get any of that. What I would like to come out of this COP, because there's been a lot of judgment in other parts of the world about it being hosted here in the Middle East and in Dubai, is I hope there is a real demonstration from this region and particularly the oil and gas industries to commit. Because if we create a tipping point here in this region, it's going to change the whole world. And I really think there is an amazing opportunity for this region to play a seriously global role in what's happening.
So I will build on his point, all of that, but specifically his point. And by COP29, we would really like to see some evidence that it has happened. Because we all talked about the gaps in the business models. Really want to see the climate finance and the climate technology comes together as a solid business case. And hopefully in COP29, we should be sitting in this panel and talking about what really worked and how do we move forward faster. Because the market scalability is so important to drive this conversation forward. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. Thank you for that. Thank you to organize this session and to share this sharing of insights with you. And I wish you a very good COP28. I hope that you can have some rest in your second day in Dubai, Tina. Thank you, everybody thank you for being here. Thank you to those who are following online. Thank you to Johnson Controls for organizing this session. Thank you to the Global ABC for hosting it, to the technical team as well. See you in the corridors, in the meeting rooms. 2 important dates, the Building Breakthroughs event, as Yves Laurent was saying, on the 6th, and on the 10th of December, one down in the NDC Partnership Pavilion, the PIB program will be presenting the NDC report. So what is it that countries put on the paper concerning their commitments on buildings? Very important reality check also as countries prepare to renew their NDCs. It's important to know what they put on the paper so that these communities can put pressure for the next round of NDCs to be better. So thank you, everyone. It was an absolute pleasure. I wish you a good day. Thank you.